It's Miss Johnson again. You know how I told you I love to read. Would you like another story? I'm trying to find stories that you might be able to relate to, and I found this book, and it is called My Brother's a Pain in the Back Seat. Does that sound familiar? And you know what? This was written by Dale Beulah, and you know why this is so special to me? Because I actually got to meet him one day, and there is his real autograph. He autographed this book for me, so I really think this is special. Well, I'm going to read you this story, and you see if this sounds familiar to you. When I was 10 years old, my pesky brother CJ drove me crazy every chance he got. He made my life difficult. Because he was younger, he could get away with anything. Since I was the oldest of 3 boys and 2 girls, I'd get blamed for everything, even things I didn't do. My parents said things like, "Act your age. Dale, you should know better. You're the oldest." Have you ever heard that before, if you're the oldest in your family? I did. I remember that. CJ took advantage of me because I was the oldest. He especially liked to blow spitballs at me. If I barely touched him, he screamed that I was beating him up. And I couldn't do anything about it because I was the oldest. My mother would say, "Overlook him, he's your little brother." And CJ would just smile. It happened over and over, even on vacations. When we were supposed to help with the suitcases, he'd whine, "They're too heavy." So I'd have to take them down. When CJ did carry something, he'd drop it, and then I'd have to go get it. I'll never forget one special trip. The car was loaded down. The 2 little ones, Sissy and Jonathan, climbed into the front seat with Mom and Dad. CJ and my sister Janet hopped into the back seat with me, and Daddy cleared his voice. "Kids," he said, "don't forget the rules in this car." And he counted off. Rule number 1, hush up in the back seat. We all chimed in. I was always quiet because I knew the rules. "Okay," Daddy said, "what is rule number 2? Don't fight over the seats," we called out. We never fought over seats in my daddy's car. We each had our own spot, and we sat there every time. I always sat in the back seat, next to the door, behind my mother. I read books to entertain myself because our old 53 Chevy had no radio. And when I was 10, most cars did not have radios. Can you imagine that? That must have been a long time ago. Well, my sister Janet always sat in the middle next to me. She put her feet on the hump because she had short legs. She spent her entire trip working puzzles, especially dot-to-dot and maze puzzles. She loved to put her pencil on the maze puzzle where it said "start here" and try to find her way out of the maze. But if we hit a bump, her pencil would shoot across the page, and then she'd have to start over. My brother CJ always sat next to the door behind Daddy. He never bought books or puzzles. Instead, he spent his entire time just bothering me. Well, on this trip, all of us kids settled down as the car hummed along the road, and I quietly read my books while Janet worked on her puzzles. In a little while, CJ slowly raised his hand into his pocket and pulled out a little alligator clip. It was so small, I didn't even notice it. It was shaped like a teeny tiny clothespin and made of stainless steel with sharp needle teeth. Daddy had told him not to get those clips out of the toolbox, but CJ had his pocket full of them anyway. Soon he squeezed that clip open and slipped it behind my sister's back all the way over to my side of the car. That's when I felt a sharp pinch, and I jumped and screamed, "Ow!" Oh dear. My daddy pulled off the road and stopped the car. He turned around and stared at us in the back seat, and then he growled, "The next time that happens, it'll be the last time it happens." I just kept quiet. CJ shrugged his shoulders and said, "I didn't do nothing." That's what he always said. Poor innocent little brother. Daddy pulled the car back to the road. We were back on vacation, and when my arm stopped hurting, I went back to reading my books, and Janet went back to working her puzzles. But in a little while, CJ slipped his hand behind his pocket. This time he took out a long alligator clip with a strong spring, and again he reached behind my sister's back to where I was sitting, and ow! He got me again in the very same spot. All at once, Daddy stomped on the brakes. The car groaned as it went into a four-wheel slide and stopped. We peeled ourselves off the back of the front seat. Our old car didn't have seat belts. Then something else happened. Daddy did not say a word. My heart pounded as he got out. He stepped slowly to the back of the car. He opened CJ's car. He reached into the back seat and he pulled my brother out. Well, Daddy lifted CJ up in the air, and my brother's eyes got bigger and bigger as his feet dangled above the ground. His mouth dropped open, but no words came out. Daddy gritted his teeth. "Christopher James, I don't want to hear a word out of you for the next 30 minutes, and keep your hands to yourself. Got it?" With tears in his eyes, CJ nodded as Daddy put him back in the car and closed the door. We drove off. My brother sobbed softly. I grinned to myself. Daddy finally got the right one. After all of these years, I finally experienced justice. It felt wonderful. Well, we were back on vacation. As we drove, my arm stopped hurting, and I went back to reading my books, and Janet went back to working her puzzles. But CJ kept sniffling. His lips trembled as he finally asked, "Mama, is 30 minutes up yet?" My mother looked at her watch. "Yes, it's been about 30 minutes, but don't make a bunch of noise and bother your father while he's driving. He has to watch the road." But, CJ whimpered. "Daddy, you know when you stopped the car back there and you took me out of the car and you held me up in the air? My shoes fell off." My daddy immediately pulled the car off the road again and stopped. I thought I saw steam coming out of his head when around he turned in the seat. He yanked off his hat and glared straight at my brother. "Why in the world didn't you tell me?" "You told me not to say nothing," CJ answered innocently. I knew Daddy was trapped. For once, my brother had done exactly what he was told. He hadn't said a word. "We'll have to go back and get your shoes," Daddy fussed. "Without those shoes, you'll be barefoot the rest of the vacation, CJ. We can't afford to buy you another pair." Daddy jerked the steering wheel around and pulled the gear shift down. The car spun around and left burned rubber marks on the road, and we tore back 30 miles to get those shoes. Luckily, CJ's shoes were still there beside the road. Of course, they had been flattened a little bit and covered with tire tracks, but my daddy got out of the car, picked up the shoes, and threw them in the back seat, and we were back on vacation. So, from then on, Whenever we got into the car to go somewhere, my daddy never told us to hush up again. All he ever said was, "You better remember those shoes." And we all knew what that meant. The end of this story. I hope you liked this story. I thought it was a fun story because, gosh, all of us know if you don't have any brothers and sisters, you can imagine what it would be like. If you do have brothers and sisters, are you the oldest one? Are you the youngest one? Are you the middle child? We all have situations, don't we? But I think CJ got payback, don't you? See you later, guys. Miss you and love you. Hugs, hugs.